When should Sujud Al Sahw be performed and how is it done? It's almost like a tongue twister. Should Sujud Al Sahw. Okay, so Sahw is being forgetfulness. You're forgetting something that you should be aware of. So this is usually regarding um, the units of the prayer or something done. So first of all, how to do a sajda to sahu or sujood to sahu? You recite the tashahhud, at-tahiyatu lillahi wa salawatu tayyibat, until you get to the shahada, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Then you say one salam to the right, and then you do two sajdas. And then when you get up, you finish off as normal. At-tahiyat, the salah on the Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the dua, and then two salams. One to the right, one to the left. That's how it's done. And it's not much more complicated than that. So, when do you have to do a sajda to sahu or sujood to sahu? So, it's basically done if you miss a wajib, or you delay a wajib, or you do one before its time. That's generally when it's done. I'm going to talk about the wajibat, so don't worry about that. But it's usually in those situations. This is if it's accidentally. If you deliberately miss a wajib or delay or these sorts of things, then you have to repeat the prayer. It's like a strong, it's like a punishment for not showing the prayer the reverence it deserves. So someone deliberately starts the prayer, Allahu Akbar, and then doesn't recite the Fatiha deliberately, then, it deserves reverence. Don't do that. So in that situation, you have to repeat the prayer. But if you miss a wajib, or you do it before its time, or you do it after its time, then you have to repeat. Then you have to do a sajda to sahu. Right. So let's look at the wajibat of the prayer. And these are covered in many books. And I do say, study fiqh, because fiqh is empowering. And this is quite a long list, actually. But let's look at some of the things. I won't go into detail in explaining them. But what is wajib in the prayer? Allah. So the recitation of the Fatiha fully, from Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen to Waladdaleen is wajib. Adding a surah after in the fard prayer, in the first two units, adding a surah or three short verses or one verse equivalent to the length of three short verses has to be recited. Okay. Reciting the Fatiha in the first two units is also a wajib in the fard. So in the fard you have 3, sometimes on 4 units. You can't just be silent in the first two or recite something else and then only do the Fatiha in the third and fourth. The prayer would be valid. That's another discussion, but it has to be done in the first two. So any of these things that are missed out or contravened, Sujud Al Sahw. You have to recite the Fatiha first and then the surah. You can't say Qul Huwallahu Ahad, do that surah and then the Fatiha. Right? You have to have 2 sajdas for every unit. So Fajr, there are 2 units, so 2 for each, so 4 sajdas. And if you were to, so Dhuhr, 4 units, 8 sajdas. So each unit 2 sajdas. If you miss a sajda in a unit, like in Dhuhr, in the first unit you only do 1 sajda, then you have to make it up. So in the second one, you do 3, or you do 3 in the third or the fourth, but you make up that missed one, and then a sajda to sahu to compensate for the deficiency. Okay. You have to have the qira'ah of the Quran when you're standing up in the qiyam before the ruku'. So you can't go into ruku' or get up and then recite some Quran and then go into sajda. No, it has to be before. Another wajib is the bone of the nose and also the forehead. But the bone of the nose, the hard part of the bone of the nose, has to go onto the ground when you're in sajda. So the bone has to be touching. So if you're wearing glasses and the glasses are going to prevent you, you have to take them off. But the bone, so you can't just do a sajda by putting your forehead. The wajib is you have to have your bone touching. Yeah. Another wajib is that the majority of the forehead needs to be on the ground when doing the sajda. So if I was to lower my hat like this, I've covered it. And technically it'll be valid, but it's deficient. So sajda to sahu. If I did it deliberate, there'll be a problem. If I had my hat this low, so some of it is touching, that's not most of it. Right? So the majority of the forehead has to be touching as best one can with the nose. Another thing is that the hands need to be on the knees when a person goes into ruku'. That's also wajib. Another wajib is you have to be completely still, even if it's for a second, in your ruku', your qiyam, in your ruku', your qiyam, and in your sajdas. And every position of the prayer, you have to come to a stop. So you can't go into a sajda like you're pecking. Like in the hadith, it's described as certain people where they rush the prayer, so it's like a chicken pecking. So go into sajda, stay there at least for a second, and then get back up. The first sitting in a 3 or 4 unit prayer is wajib. It becomes fard in Fajr, for example. If it's a 2 unit prayer, it becomes fard. But if it's a 3 or 4, then the first sitting is wajib, and the last one is a rukn, right, fard. Okay, it's also wajib to sit. Well, technically, it's fard because that becomes the last sitting after the sajda to sahu. You have to sit there. Some of the ulama have said it's wajib, but it's a fard. You have to say the tashahhud in the first sitting, whenever that is. So the first sitting, or if there's only one sitting, you have to say the words of the tashahhud. At-tahiyyatu lillahi was-salawatu wat-tayyibat, until the end that you know. 2 salams at the end. The first one takes you out of the prayer, unless you're doing a sajda to sahu, but 2 salams at the end. In the witr prayer, reading a dua. So the qunut that we learn, Allahumma inna nasta'inuka wa nastaghfiruka wa nu'minu bika, that's great if you know that, but you can recite any dua. Allahumma hdina fi man hadayt, or Rabbana atina fi dunya hasana wa fil akhirati hasana wa qina adhab an-nar. So a dua. Also the takbir, when you raise your hands in the witr, after in the third unit, you recite the Fatiha, a surah, and then the takbir, and when you raise your hands, that is also wajib according to some scholars. Okay, starting the prayer with the words Allahu Akbar, and you don't use any other form of dhikr, not La ilaha illallah or Ar-Rahmanu Akbar. It's the wording we learned from the Prophet was Allahu Akbar. The 6 extra takbirat of the Eid prayers, they are wajibah. So if you miss them, you have to, the Imam would have to do the sajda to sahu, although he's usually recommended to skip it. And the takbirah, normally they're saying the takbir is a sunnah, but in the Eid prayer, because he does the 3 takbirs after the Quranic recitation, so he does a 4th one, that's wajib to go into ruku'. And and if you're reciting, if the Imam is reciting in Fajr, Maghrib and Isha and the Jummah, and the Eid prayers, even if it's a qada, and the Taraweeh and the Witr, if you're praying Witr in a group, then the Imam has to recite out loud enough for him and someone else to hear. But all the other prayers he whispers, and if you're praying by yourself, the same rules apply to those prayers. You can recite out loud or quietly. Nafil prayers, sunnah prayers, quietly. The sunnah of the daytime, quiet. Nighttime, you can raise your voice. Yeah, so I just talked about that. And they're most of the wajibats, right? And so if you contravene any of this, you'll have been skipping a wajib. Or another one is in the 3rd unit. Another wajib actually is, but you don't do anything to compensate with this, but you have to follow the Imam immediately. Sometimes with people, the Imam will say Sami Allahu liman hamida, and the guy is like really casually saying, no, I want to say all 3 of the tasbihat. Subhana Rabbiyal Azim, Subhana Rabbiyal. Hey, look, he's gone, but they still say, no, mutaba'atul imam. You follow the imam. When he moves, you move. There's only one exception, which is like in a 3 or 4 unit prayer. The tashahud is wajib to say fully, and getting up to follow him is also wajib. So there's a like an opposition between these two. So you can choose either skip the rest of the tashahud and get up, or just follow him, or just finish off the tashahud. So, but that covers so that covers that scenario, and then you just do a Sujud Al Sahw as I mentioned, and done. All right.
لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله